A general called her methods fantasy. The weapon was unfamiliar, the conditions impossible. But with one pull of the trigger, this underestimated woman was about to prove that physics doesn't care about politics. Before she was a legend, Aria Thorne was a ghost, a whisper of potential in a world of noise. She grew up in a small Vermont town known for its autumn leaves and the quiet dignity of its craftsmen. Her father wasn't a gunsmith, but a master watchmaker. His world was one of tiny gears and delicate springs, a universe where a micron of error meant the difference between perfect time and failure. At his workbench, surrounded by the scent of cleaning oil and old brass, Aria learned her true calling. It wasn't about weapons, it was about the sacred harmony of variables. While other kids played, she learned patience, precision, and the unnerving focus required to align dozens of moving parts into a single, flawless system. That focus was a liability on the day she walked into the Marine Corps recruitment office. The air hung thick with the smell of cheap coffee and stale paper. Behind a metal desk, under a buzzing fluorescent light and a peeling motivational poster, sat Gunnery Sergeant Rex Dino Kincaid. He was a relic, built like a filing cabinet with a worldview to match. He glanced at Aria, a lean 30-year-old woman with an intensity in her eyes that he immediately mistook for fragility. "Lost, little lady," he grunted, not looking up from his crossword puzzle. "I'm here to enlist, Gunnery Sergeant." That made him look up. He scanned her from head to toe, a dismissive smirk playing on his lips. "This isn't a book club, sweetheart. We break things here. Including people." He slid the paperwork across the desk. "Don't waste my time if you're not serious. Neither is threading a 0.5 mm balance staff through a jewel bearing in a single pass," she replied, her voice calm and even. "But some of us enjoy a challenge." Kincaid paused, his pen hovering over the paper. The analogy was lost on him, but the steel in her tone wasn't. It was the first time he'd been truly silenced by a recruit, but it wouldn't be the last. Boot camp was a symphony of organized chaos. For Aria, the physical demands were a problem to be solved with physics, not just force. During grueling pack marches, when bigger recruits relied on brute strength, she focused on body mechanics, leverage, and breath control, moving with an eerie efficiency. Her drill instructor, a man who seemed carved from granite, took a special interest in her. "Thorne," he bellowed during a combat drill. "You think that 120-pound frame can haul a wounded fire team member to safety?" The platoon went silent. "No, drill sergeant," she answered, her voice cutting through the yard's tension. He stormed over, his face inches from hers. "Then what in the hell are you doing in my corps?" "Making sure he doesn't get hit in the first place, drill sergeant." A flicker of something, not quite a smile, but a crack in his hardened facade, appeared for a split second. It was the only approval she needed. The path from boot camp to the elite high-angle marksman school in the Colorado Rockies was a blur of perfect test scores and quiet overachievement. But arrival was like stepping onto another planet. The air was thin, the peaks were unforgiving, and the man in charge was a legend known only as Ghost. Master Gunslinger Elias Ghost Vance addressed the 20 candidates with a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "Welcome to the top of the world. Most of you don't belong here." He paced before them, his movements economical, his eyes scanning each face. They lingered on Aria. "Sniping isn't a skill. It's a disease of the mind. A lonely obsession with perfection. Some of you will break physically. The rest of you," he paused, "will break spiritually. We will make sure of it." His methods were brutal. They held stress positions for hours in the biting cold. They were deprived of sleep, then forced to solve complex ballistic equations while being berated. Vance's challenges were personal, almost cruel. He was a master of psychological warfare. "Your math is clean, Thorne," Vance said after a grueling field exercise. "But when your soul is frozen solid and the wind is screaming lies in your ear, your formulas won't save you." "What will?" Aria didn't flinch. Trust in the data, master gunslinger. And the discipline to execute. His eyes narrowed. He was testing for a crack in her certainty, but found only reinforced steel. The final test was called the long sleep. Candidates were dropped into the high-altitude wilderness for 72 hours. They had to remain perfectly camouflaged, motionless, with minimal water and no food, enduring sub-zero nights and the constant, gnawing isolation. One by one, their emergency beacons lit up as men twice Aria's size succumbed to the cold or the crushing loneliness. Aria became part of the mountain. She felt the subtle shifts in wind, the way the snow settled, the slow crawl of the sun across the frozen sky. The cold was a physical presence, a constant pressure threatening to shatter her focus. She didn't fight it, she accepted it, compartmentalized it, and let her mind retreat into the cold, hard certainty of her training. On the third day, as the sun crested a distant peak, her target appeared. She didn't think. She didn't feel. She became a conduit for a single, perfect action. Her shot was the only sound for miles. When the extraction team found her, she was half frozen but her rifle was pristine. Only 4 candidates remained. Vance looked at her, not with approval, but with a new, unsettling level of scrutiny. He had tried to find her breaking point and discovered she didn't seem to have one. 6 months later, Specialist Aria Thorne stood on a sun-scorched range in the Nevada desert. Before her, resting on a reinforced bipod, was the Kraken XR-50. It was less a rifle and more a piece of light artillery, a 50-pound beast of steel and polymer. The challenge: hit a target at 3,700 meters, well over 2 miles away, shattering the current world record. "Hope your shoulder's insured, Thorne," sneered Major Kent "Bulldog" Sterling, the range officer. His nickname was generous. He had the disposition of a cornered badger. "This thing has a bite." Aria ignored him, her focus entirely on the tablet displaying environmental data. The heat rising from the desert floor created a shimmering curtain of mirage, twisting the distant target into a watery illusion. It was a shooter's nightmare. Watching from the observation tower was Colonel Eva Rostova. She was a sharp, no-nonsense officer from Strategic Command, and unlike Sterling, she saw past Aria's gender and size. She saw a strategic asset. "Taking bets, gentlemen," someone whispered near Sterling. "Only a fool bets against the house," Rostova's voice cut in, silencing the chatter. "Let's see what the specialist can do." Aria became a statue. Her process was a silent ritual of checks and calculations. Wind, humidity, barometric pressure, the Coriolis effect, spin drift, even the temperature difference downrange, each variable was a note in a complex symphony only she could hear. She settled behind the Kraken, the weapon feeling like an extension of her own skeleton. Her breathing slowed, each exhale a measured release of tension. "Control, this is Siren 1. Permission to engage," her voice was flat, professional. "Siren 1, you are clear. Fire when ready." The world seemed to hold its breath. The assembled officers leaned forward. Sterling crossed his arms, a smug look on his face. Aria's finger tightened on the trigger. The explosion was apocalyptic. The Kraken roared, kicking back with the force of a charging bull, blasting a cloud of dust and sand into the air. Then, silence. A profound, agonizing silence that stretched for an eternity as the bullet traveled across the desert. 1 second. 2. 3. 4. 5. A metallic ping echoed faintly through the spotter's high-powered microphone, transmitted to their headsets. Impact, the spotter's voice cracked with disbelief. Confirmed hit. Dead center. The range erupted. Shouts of astonishment and denial filled the air. Sterling's jaw hung open. Colonel Rostova allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She keyed her mic, confirmed distance and impact point. The verification team's report came back moments later, their voices trembling with excitement. Ma'am, distance confirmed at 3,712 meters. Impact is less than 2 inches from absolute center. Rostova looked down at the firing line, where Aria was already running calculations for a follow-up shot. Specialist Thorne, Rostova's voice broadcast across the range. Can you do that again? Yes, ma'am, Aria replied, not looking up. Permission to confirm. Proceed. The Kraken roared a second time. The agonizing wait followed. Second impact confirmed, the spotter yelled. 1 inch from the first. Repeat, 1 inch grouping at 3,700 meters. This time, the silence that followed was one of pure, unadulterated awe. Major Sterling slowly walked over to Aria and, for the first time, looked at her with something other than disdain. He simply nodded. The gesture spoke volumes. In the space of 5 minutes, Aria Thorne hadn't just broken a record, she had broken the very concept of what was considered possible. The footage of Aria's record shot circulated through classified channels like a shockwave. It wasn't just a feat of marksmanship, it was a fundamental challenge to military doctrine. Suddenly, there was no such thing as a safe distance. This led to Operation Frostbite Peak. The briefing took place in a sterile, windowless room. The mission was simple in its objective and insane in its execution. Aria was to travel to a remote base in North Dakota's most brutal winter terrain and, using a standard-issue M-22 sniper rifle, not the monstrous Kraken, hit a target at nearly 4,000 meters. The man in charge of the operation was General Marcus, the Iron Eagle, Vance, a 4-star officer with a reputation for demanding the impossible. He was also, Aria learned, the older brother of her former instructor, Ghost Vance. The general's skepticism was palpable. It wasn't just professional, it felt personal. My brother says you're a prodigy, specialist, General Vance had said in their first meeting. I, however, believe in established limits. You're here to either prove him right or prove that fairy tales don't belong in my army. To prepare her, they brought in a legend, Warrant Officer Kai Oracle Tanaka. A quiet, unassuming Japanese-American man in his 60s, Tanaka was a Zen master in a sniper's body. Forget the numbers, Tanaka told her on their first day, standing in the face of a howling North Dakota blizzard. The math gets you to the mountain, but it can't get you to the peak. At this distance, the rifle must become an extension of your will. You don't calculate the wind, you feel it. You don't predict the bullet drop, you know it. For a week, he pushed her beyond calculation. He had her shoot in whiteout conditions, her fingers numb, her face burning from the wind chill. He didn't ask for data, he asked for feeling. What is the snow telling you, Aria? What is the rifle whispering? The day of the test was brutally cold. General Vance stood with the observation team, his arms crossed, his expression a mask of doubt. The target was a steel plate at 3,950 meters, a tiny speck in a world of white. Aria settled behind the M-22. She closed her eyes for a moment, ignoring the digital readouts and focusing on Tanaka's teachings. She felt the rhythm of the wind, the heavy density of the frigid air. She didn't calculate the shot. She visualized it, a perfect, incandescent line arcing across the frozen landscape. She squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle was sharp, quickly swallowed by the vast emptiness. The seconds ticked by, each one a lifetime. 6 seconds. 7. The radio crackled. Impact. Confirmed impact. Center mass. A stunned silence fell over the observation team. General Vance stared, his jaw tight. Fluke, he muttered. Do it again. Aria was already chambering another round. The conditions had shifted slightly, a new gust of wind swirling down from the ridge. She adjusted, not by changing numbers on a screen, but by a subtle shift in her aim, an intuitive correction born from a week of brutal, Zen-like training. She fired. Another endless wait. Second impact confirmed, the spotter's voice was a near shout of pure adrenaline. 1 inch from the first. My God, General, it's a 1-inch group. General Vance slowly lowered his binoculars. He walked over to Aria, who was now calmly clearing her weapon. He looked at her, then at the distant, impossible target, and then back at her. The skepticism in his eyes was gone, replaced by a look of profound, world-altering disbelief. It seems, he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the entire range, that my brother was right. Aria's success in Operation Frostbite Peak should have silenced all doubters. Instead, it galvanized them. Her methods were too radical, her results too unbelievable. The old guard needed to reassert control. They sent Major Derek, the metric, Callahan. Callahan was a man who lived and died by the book. He believed intuition was a flaw and that any result that couldn't be replicated by a formula was an anomaly to be dismissed. He arrived at Aria's new training facility in the Mojave Desert with the clear intent of exposing her program as a fraud. Your trajectory visualization sounds more like voodoo than science, Staff Sergeant, he announced on the first day, his voice dripping with condescension. I'm here to conduct a real evaluation. My protocols. My weapon. The test he designed was a public execution. The setting was a desert valley known for its treacherous, swirling winds and blinding heat mirage. The challenge, 5 targets at unknown distances, presented with only 10 seconds between each. And the weapon was Callahan's personal rifle. When Colonel Rostova, now Aria's commanding officer, saw the rifle, she tried to intervene. Major, this is not an assessment, it's a setup. This trigger pull is inconsistent, and the optics aren't properly calibrated for this environment. If her methods are so revolutionary, Colonel, Callahan shot back with a tight smile, they should transcend mere equipment, shouldn't they? Aria stopped her. I accept the parameters, sir. She knew this was inevitable. Some men couldn't be convinced by data. They had to be broken by demonstration. She lay behind the unfamiliar rifle, its weight and balance all wrong. The trigger felt sluggish, the scope's zero felt off. It was a rifle designed to fail. First target, presenting now. A silhouette appeared through the shimmering heat haze at what she estimated was 2,400 meters. She had seconds. Her mind became a supercomputer. She didn't fight the rifle's flaws, she incorporated them into her calculations. She compensated for the heavy trigger, mentally adjusted for the scope's likely zero, and fired. 3 seconds later, impact. Center mass. Callahan's smile faltered. The second target appeared. Another hit. The third, at an even greater distance, through a wicked crosswind. Hit. With each impossible shot, Callahan's face darkened from skepticism to raw resentment. After the fourth target fell, Callahan stepped forward. Final target. Moving engagement. A murmur went through the observers. A moving target at this range with an unfamiliar weapon wasn't a test. It was an insult. The final silhouette began moving laterally across a distant ridge, approximately 2,800 meters away. It was the shot of a lifetime, and she had to make it in seconds. She tracked the target, her mind a blur of lead calculations, wind deflection, and intuitive adjustments taught by Tanaka. She didn't aim where the target was, or even where it was going to be. She aimed where the universe would align for a perfect, impossible intersection. Her final shot split the air. The wait was the longest yet. The radio crackled with a sound of pure shock. Impact. Confirmed hit on a moving target. Center mass. The entire observation team, hardened special operators and seasoned instructors, broke into spontaneous, thunderous applause. Everyone except Callahan. His face was a mask of fury and humiliation. This proves nothing, he snapped, snatching his rifle back. It just proves she's a freak. A single talented shooter doesn't justify rewriting doctrine. Just then, a new voice, calm and full of authority, cut through the tension. On the contrary, Major. I believe it does. General Vance emerged from an observation vehicle that had arrived unnoticed. He walked slowly toward the group, his eyes fixed on Callahan. "General, Callahan stammered, his face draining of color. "I saw the whole thing, Major," Vance said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You came here to find a flaw in her methodology. Instead, you have profoundly demonstrated a flaw in your own judgment." He turned to Aria. "Exceptional work, Staff Sergeant. Truly exceptional." Then he turned back to Callahan. "Major, I suggest you enroll in Staff Sergeant Thorne's next course. It appears you have a great deal to learn." 1 year later, Staff Sergeant First Class Aria Thorne stood before the 4th graduating class of the Extended Precision Program. What began as a radical experiment was now established doctrine. In the audience sat generals, Allied military attaches, and, in the third row, taking meticulous notes, was Major Callahan. He was now one of the program's most fervent advocates. The program's success was undeniable. On a large screen beside the stage, a recently declassified video played. It showed a graduate of Aria's program, deployed in a hostile territory, making a 3,000-meter shot under fire to neutralize a threat and save a hostage. The video was grainy, but the result was crystal clear. It was tangible proof of her legacy. After the ceremony, Colonel Rostova approached her. "The Secretary of Defense has approved international expansion. Our allies are requesting your expertise. You'll be leading mobile training teams, starting with the SAS in Hereford." That night, Aria found herself back at the empty long-range facility, standing at the very spot where it all began. "Thought I might find you here." Warrant Officer Kai Oracle Tanaka emerged from the shadows. "You changed the world, you know," he said quietly. "I just applied the fundamentals, Kai." "No," he corrected gently. "You taught them that the fundamentals were broader than they imagined. Records are just footprints in the snow, Aria. They show where someone has been. You didn't just leave footprints, you carved a new path for everyone else to follow." The weight of that legacy settled on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a quiet, profound responsibility. What seemed impossible yesterday was standard procedure today. As a military transport lifted off the next morning, carrying her toward her next challenge, she knew her greatest achievement wasn't a single shot, no matter the distance. It was the ripple effect, the knowledge that in military facilities around the world, soldiers were now attempting, and achieving, the impossible, because one woman had proven it was merely difficult. Aria Thorne proved that one person with enough skill and conviction can challenge an entire system. In your own life, what's the biggest barrier to innovation you've seen? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, please be respectful to one another. For more stories that defy the limits, make sure you subscribe.